Okay, I think we're finally on air. All right. So good morning. Everyone have a good weekend? Enjoy the sunshine? Anyone do the hackathon? Not in this section, eh? But yeah, I know. Yeah, it was a sold out event. I think they originally planned something like 50 spots, opened it up to 70 spots, and they still had people like registering. So it was, from my understanding, it went well. I had a few calls from Ross. So, but I haven't seen the final results. What I wanted to do today was to go over how to do charts in JavaFX. It's actually pretty easy. And so you can look like a rock star without too much work. Talk about encryption and hashing, and then move into lambdas, which I didn't spell that very well. Anyhow, we'll look at lambdas. So with that, we'll talk about like what is an anonymous in our class, why do we have them, and how do lambdas replace them. So you've probably seen it in other courses and things like that. Hopefully not too crazy. So charts. In JavaFX, they've built in quite a few charts. And so it's they're actually reasonably easy to use. They take in something called an XY chart.series, which is like a list of key value pairs. So like in this case, you know, for the series that's in blue here, you can see in January, there was a value of probably around 20. Oops, that's next. February, there was a value of like, looks like around 26 or 28, something like that. So all it does is it's gonna pair those together and then it draws them out. And we can configure these charts any way we want. We can have them, you know, these bars horizontally or vertically like they are here. You can add multiple series. So you can see here I have a couple different years worth of data showing in the chart. You just add other series to it and it automatically will add it in. And I've also put in a reference for you, which is a really good, is this going to be a hyperlink? No, it's not. Find it quick though. So if you do JavaFX bar chart, this steps you through how to style them, how to use them. So it's like a good link to use in the future. You can see here, like they style this one. They've got like a gradient fill and rounded edges and all kinds of things. So you can do a lot with these. If you read through the whole piece here, you can see here they've added in different colored, you know, horizontal lines in the background. Keep going. They add in. Here's a horizontal version of it. How to do stacked charts. So I'm not going to read through it, but the idea is know that there is a lot of ways that you can configure these things and use them however you like. So you're ready to experiment and try one yourself? Yeah. All right. So let's go. Take good old NetBeans here. We'll do a new project. Remember last week we talked about what works best in terms of learning and stuff in the class. So if at any point throughout this you've got questions, please ask, right? Make sure to, yeah? Pardon? I am, yes. Yeah, yeah, as per the requests. So the, let's see here. So let's call this thing Winter 18. To March 26, almost the end of March. 4 weeks left in the semester. Okay. So in order to use charts, obviously we're gonna have to have a view and a controller. I'm not gonna make a model class this time around. We'll just put in some dummy data. But typically you would, get information from maybe your database or something like that. So we'll do new, and then if you choose empty fxml, we can make a super awesome chart view, something like that. Next, use a Java controller. And if you say next again, you can use a cascading style sheet. That way you can make them all fancy. Finish. Okay, so what we've just created there, let me just close down some of these other files. So we should have a CSS file with pretty much nothing in it. Then we've got our controller class, which is just some stub data. So we have the initialize method, and that's it. And then we have our fxml file, which is our view. And there's not much in it other than its height and width, controller information, and its CSS file. So let's double click on our view. And that will launch Scene Builder for us. There we go. And then let's make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to click on anchor pane in the hierarchy. And if you go over to the right-hand side of the bottom layout, the size. So instead of 600 by 400, let's make it, I don't know, 800 by 600. It's a little bit more real estate to play with. Okay. Everyone so good? Okay. And then what we'll do is, you can see in our usual, everything we've gone to in the past, we have containers that hold things so we can organize them. Then we have controls, which is our typical labels, buttons, and whatnot. And below that, we have charts. We also have things that we haven't really played with yet, like shapes and paths and things like that. We even have some 3D things in here, but today we're going to look at charts. And you can see there's lots of different types of charts already pre-built for you. So we have area charts, bar charts, which is what we're going to use, bubble charts, pie charts, scatter charts. So let's just drag our bar chart into the scene. Okay. And if you look in the hierarchy on the left, you'll see there's a bar chart object here. And I will caution you that I have experienced, and some other students had experienced it in the last class. When you expand this, that's where we get access to our axis, the category and the number axis. In some cases, for whatever reason, Scene Builder hangs. I don't know why. Some little bug in Scene Builder. So if you expand it and it hangs, don't worry about it. I've got a workaround for you, but it could hang. I'm just going to throw it out there. So hopefully it won't for me. So expand it, and then you can see there's a category axis and a number axis. So the category axis is whatever units you want to group things in, right? So the example I gave in the slide was months. So we'll use the same here. So if I click on it, I can go down to code, bottom here, and I can give it an FX ID. So let's call that months. Then we go over to the number axis. And we'll have to give it an FX ID as well. What do we want to make our chart track? Everyone's just staring back at me. Pick a topic, any topic. Bumblebees. Okay. Bumblebees. I did say any topic. Okay. So bumblebees. So okay, all right. We'll track how many bumblebees in an area. How about that for Monday? Bumblebees. So 1 second here. Did it hang for anyone, or was it okay for everyone? That's good. Okay, the other thing we need to do is our actual bar chart itself. We should give it an FX ID as well. So let's just call it the bar chart. And then maybe we'll add a label to this as well. So under controls, we can go to label. And let's see, bumblebees. Population. Population. One of the things I noticed when I was marking the assignments, and I've marked all but a couple that I had trouble working with. So I think I've sent, if your assignment's not marked, I think I sent you an email to come see me. But one of the things I noticed when I was marking was when you're building graphical user interfaces and any kind of code really, when you submit it, whether it's for school or for a client or for work or what have you, you always want to make sure that it has a real professional flair to it. And some of the things that really take away from that is if you have things that are truncated and things like that. So see here we have it's just a simple label, and I had people that had labels like this on the assignment, but they didn't make the label big enough. So they would have something like this, or where they get like part of a word, even though there's lots of screen space where they could have made it like a full size label that would be readable. So when you're working with things that people can see and interact with, always just take a step back and say, okay, is it truncated? Are things overlapping? Are they lined up? Those little things can have a big difference in terms of polish, right? So like there was there's certainly at least one assignment where they had set up a grid pane, which was great, but then they made the labels like super small. So like a lot of it was really truncated. Then they had a bunch of white space and then a text field. So they could have made it so that it was really nice and easy to see. One way you can do that is if you click on your label and you go to layout, you see here, because I was playing with the size, it says, okay, well, here's the preferred height and width because I played around with it. But if you just say, use the computed size, then what it'll do is it'll try to size it to hold whatever you type into it automatically. So just a little, polish type of thing there. So we'll say save. Make sure you always say save when you flip between NetBeans and Scene Builder. And if I go view, show sample controller skeleton, this shows us the minimum things that we need to have in our controller. So I'm just going to copy these add fxml definitions here. copy them over to my controller class, and I'll just paste them in. And to do the imports, I'll do Control Shift and I all at the same time. So, okay. Don't know why I didn't pick up on the bar chart stuff, but there we go. Okay, so now we have a bar chart. We don't have to worry about populating with a specific type of data, so we can get rid of that. And the other thing I mentioned was that, go back to the slide for a second. So we have the bar chart. So we've done that. So it's 2-axis chart with, and they're populated with these things called xychart.series objects. So these are a list of, months and dates, or products and sales volumes, or whatever you're trying to show. So we need to track those as well. So we're going to add in xychart.series, and we can put in, let's call it the B count of 2017, and we'll do another one. (2018). So remember when our scene loads, the first method that it's going to go to is the initialize method, right? But it goes there first no matter what. So in here is where we're going to configure our chart. So we'll do B count 2017, and we'll say that's equal to a new XY chart dot series. Okay, so just like any other observable list or type of list or array list, we have to first create the list, and then we can add items to it. And then let's see what else we can do here. We'll add some labels to the chart. We have in our chart, we have the category axis and the number axis. So we can configure those. So we can say months dot we can say set label, and in here we can say months. So what that'll do is on the actual chart, underneath the horizontal axis at the bottom, it'll say months. And we can do something similar. What was our other? We called it bumblebees. Thank you for that suggestion. All right, bumblebees dot set label. Bumblebee population. Then we had two data series. One was for the bumblebee populations in 2017, and one was the bumblebee population in 2018. So what we can do is we can give names to those data series. So that it'll actually automatically create a little legend for you. So it shows you like the color coding, like this bar is equal to the 2017 data, and this other different color is the 2018 data. So we can give names to the data series. So we have B count 2017, and here you can say set the name. And before we go much further, what we'll do is we'll create a launch method so that we can actually get this view to show, so we can see that as we've added things, what it looks like that we've added. So just give you a second to finish typing here. That's good. Okay. So let's just right click and we'll do a new Java class in the same package, and let's just call this launch bgraph. And just like every other time when we want to have our launch, we're going to extend the application class, because what we're doing is we're building our own customized application. So we say extends application, and we have to do our imports. And then, because the application class has an abstract method, we have to implement all the abstract methods. So here we have the start method. And we're also going to need a main method. So public in the main method, we just have that one method called to launch, which is part of the application class. That'll do what it needs to do to get our program up and running. And then eventually it's going to call this start method. And this is where we put in the data to load our scene. We have to tell it what we want our application to load. So we're going to create a parent object using an fxml loader. We'll load our fxml file. We called it the super awesome chart view. Okay. Perfect for a Monday morning. Along the way, every time I am doing the imports, I'm just doing Control-Shift-I, right? So whenever you see that red squiggly line underneath one of the class names, I'm just doing Control-Shift-I, and it's importing the file for us. So we create our parent, and then we create our scene. Remember, the scene is what we see. So that's a combination of the view and the controller linked together. And then we use stage, which is passed in as an argument here. For the stage, we can set the title, counts, and then we can set the stage or the scene on our stage, and we can show it. So this will load the fxml file on line 24, creates a scene object on line 25 based on what was loaded on line 24. And then the stage, again, that's like our window, right? That's passed in to us. And we're just going to set the title, which is sort of like the equivalent up here at the top. Then we set the scene that's currently showing on our stage, and then we say show it. And just while you guys are typing, I will also add this to GitHub. And when you're doing things in GitHub, just remember to always start at the project level. That way you'll get all the build information. Had a couple of projects where I had people who gave me just the class files. So it was really hard to work with that if you want to import it. Remote push. Okay, so it's also available on GitHub if you want to do any comparisons. You can find it. Let's do a little refresh here. So if you go to github.com/JaretWright, here's the actual repository name, W18, section 2, March 26. Okay, so in our project, let's go to the main menu, run and set main project. And we want it to be that one. And then we'll customize that to use the specific launch method. So if we cross our fingers, hit the run button, it gives us our chart. We haven't put any data in it yet, so it's not too impactful. But you can see if we go to our controller class and we look at these things side by side, see here the months, we set the label to be months. So down here, it says months. And for the bumblebees, we set the label to be bumblebee population. We can see that here. Because we don't have any data in our chart yet, the legend isn't showing, right? So even though we set the name for the legend, there's no data, so there's no legend showing. And we can control, right now, these are really small fonts. So we can control that. We'll use CSS to style this up. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to add some data to our graph. So normally where you get your data, a lot of times it's going to come from a database. So you're going to do like a database query, or you're going to do some kind of JSON, get some JSON file and parse it. That's where the data is going to come from. So a lot of times you'll want to do that in its own little method. So let's just, we'll set up our own method. We'll say add data to the graphs. And we'll create a method called get data. So it looks like just any other method. And all we're going to do is we're going to add data to those data series. The data series are types of lists. So they look like, when we add like to the table view object, we say, get items, which returns an observable list, and then we add to that observable list. It looks very similar here. So our B count data here. So what we say is get the data, which returns an observable list. Now we can add to our observable list. So we say add. And in there, we will add a new XY chart data. And this data accepts 2 data points. So we can put in January and a B count of, 1,000. Right, so you can imagine if you were pulling this from, say, a database, this would be like a, select star from B count, group by month name, and you're just going to parse over it and pull out the data. We'll put a few months worth of data in here. Normally, you wouldn't manually add this. But. I'm guessing B counts go up as the summer gets warmer. And then maybe they start to become less in August. You can put any data you want in. You don't have to have my exact data. So I just made it up. But the idea is we're adding in data points into our series. Okay. Now, if we run this, we got an error here. What's this error say? Get data for graph. Why is that error?
Oh, because the method name is different.
Yes. All right. There we go. I think the method name is the same. If we run it right now, it actually won't show us anything. So if I hit run, even though we put all that data into our series, it still doesn't show in our chart. And the reason for that is that much like everything else, here we had to get the data for our series and then add to it. Well, our chart's the same. So our chart, we actually haven't connected this data series to our chart yet. So to show that, what we're going to do is we reference our bar chart. So we're going to say bar chart, get the data, right? So this gives us an observable list of its current data. And we're going to say add all, and we'll call it B count 2017. Right, so it puts an observable list into the bar chart. So that bar chart is now populated with several data points. So now if we run it, we can see that it put in the data for us. So what I want you to do, right, is to now add in some data for 2018 and add it to the chart. Okay? So you give that a whirl. Anyone have any problems with it or things I can help with? Yeah. Well, with the error say. No suitable structure content data dot string. So you see how here you've got one data point, it's all one string. So at the end of January, put close and quote. At the end of January, that's the string, right? You have it as one thing, and then you got to get rid of the.
Oh my God.
You're rolling?
Yeah.
Good stuff. Nice to meet you. Kills per month. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's more the gamer. I'm hoping that's the gamer side. Yeah, okay, good. How about you? You get it rolling? Pardon me? Still opening. Okay. You guys get it going? Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. You have a lot of future data. Are you going okay? Good. Nice. A little style too. How about you guys? Like 2 in? Good. Starting. He doesn't even have this on the fire. All right. You guys get it working? Yeah. Yeah? You're super happy?
Yeah, I just want to see the colors left.
Oh, lucky you. Good one. All right. Lucky you. How are you, Sean? All good? Yeah. All right. You guys got it rocking?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So that looks like that went fairly well. So let's see. Right now it's only up to March. So I'll put in the data for this year here. We had a request to style this a little bit to be black and yellow bars. So we can play with that. Bead counts are actually going down, I think, on the whole. So we'll make the data a little bit less this year. So to add the second series, for those that haven't got to it yet, basically all you have to do is you just add in data for your second series. And then in order to add it to the chart, so right now I've built the data, but I haven't connected it to the chart. So it doesn't show. So to add it to the chart, we just say bar chart, data, add all. Now if I launch it, I just hit F6. You can see it started adding in the data for 2018, right? So one thing I want to caution you about with the way charts work is here I added in these months in order. And it's very easy, especially if you're doing a database query. If I were to say, group by month or month name, okay, what would happen is the data would come out of the database in a slightly different order. It would come out in this order. So it would be April, and then February, right? So it wouldn't come out chronologically. If you do your database query where you say group by month name, it'll sort it based on month name. So we would get something more like this. Oops. Now you can sort by month, which will give you a month number, or sorry, group by or order by month number. Let's see here. So it does something a little peculiar. Well, it's not peculiar. It's just you got to remember a chart series doesn't know what you're charting. It's charting a string versus a number. So it doesn't think in terms of like, oh, these are clearly months, and will automatically order it for you. So if I add data to my series like this, which is typically how it might come out of a database, if I were to run this now, we'll see something a little interesting happen, where the chart is completely out of order. So there's a couple ways of dealing with that. One is make sure your database query just is ordered in whatever sequence you want to add stuff to the graph. The other option is you can actually preload the chart with zeros. So you can take this little line of code here, just copy it up to here. This doesn't have to be month. I mean, it could be any type of data, but in here I could say January. Really interesting how this behaves. It doesn't aggregate, it doesn't add data together, it just overwrites it. So if I have this sort of initializing code here, control me. Right, so I think that's, yeah, we only went up to August. So by adding this here first, even though these values of 0 won't be used, it actually sets the order for you. You can see now it goes in the desired order. So you can do it either way. You can have some initializing type data up front, or you can just ensure your database query or however you're getting your data is sorted before you add it to your chart. But just be aware that it behaves that way, which can be a little bit odd. Okay, then the other request I had was to add some style to the chart. And for that, we have our CSS. So we can do things with our CSS. We haven't really played around with it much in this class yet, I don't think. So one of the things is the main class there. That's going to be like our main window. We can do some stuff here right away. We can just say it looks a lot like HTML CSS, except they add in these little FX nomenclatures. But we can say background color, and then we can pick a different background color. I'm stylistically terrible. F4. Let's do that. So just by adding that little background color, we should see that when our chart comes up, it looks a little different, right? So I grabbed a shade of blue there. And if we want to change the colors of the bars on our chart, we're going to say default dash color 0 dot chart dash bar. And to fill it, we're going to say fx bar fill. And then there's a bunch of built-in colors. So I think we can actually just say black. Pretty sure. And if we do that, we have black. And any guesses of what the name of the second bar is going to be? No? I love Monday mornings. Color 1. And if we want to make it yellow for the bumblebee effect, say yellow. And then our bars will be black and yellow. And you can see it automatically updated the legend for us as well. How do I, sorry, what? Oh, when we first created the file, I'll just show you here. I'll create like a dummy one, but I said empty fxml, and this is, we'll just call this the test view. You say next, you choose Java controller. If you say next again, you can use cascading style sheet, and it will build one automatically. Or now that we have an existing, we can say use existing, and then we can choose the one that we had. If you haven't done that, you can still set it up. You can do it in 2 spots. You can either do it in, in Scene Builder, or if you look at the edit, just inside of the anchor pane, you can add in the name of your style sheet in the fxml file. That's probably the quickest and easiest way. Get it rocking. Does it look good? It does? Black and yellow. Okay. Black and yellow. All right, just let her get this going, and then we can play around a little bit with a couple things. Is it working okay now?
No.
Pardon me? Does it work? Is it connecting now? Yeah? Okay. So with our CSS, we can do a bunch of things to try to make it fancy. What else might we want to do here? Let's change our header label. So we have the label class, actually in general, if we just do label, let's take a look at that. I think it's just label like this. Here we can change, we can do like FX, font. And this will work with our label objects and make them all 40s. Now the downside of that is that our label at the top is no longer centered, right? Because if we had a starting location, it was on an anchor pane. So it started here and it's going to go to the right. And then our bumblebee population on the side of our chart went ... right? And I started this off saying, you don't want ... See how it doesn't look quite so polished, right? So we have a couple things that we could decide to do. One, to handle keeping our labels centered, we're better off to use containers than anchor panes, because anchor panes are just about where you've dropped that object, right? So it always looks at the upper left coordinate, that's where it starts. So let's go into Scene Builder for a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a vertical box to this whole scene so we can control things. So the way I'm going to do that is for my, my label here, I'm going to right click on it. And I'm going to go down to see where it says wrap in. So this is where you can put containers around objects. I'm going to say wrap in a vertical box. And you can see in the hierarchy in the lower left, now I have a vertical box. And if I expand it with a label. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag my bar chart now into the vertical box. So they're both in there. And I'm going to select the vertical box, right click, and say fit to parent. So what it'll do is this container now is the same size as my total scene. And everything in it is going to be aligned according to the rules of the vertical box. So if I go to properties of my vertical box, I can see the alignment set to top left. So let's set it to be center. So it'll put everything centered. The other things that we might want to do with our vertical box is bring it in a little bit from the sides. So for that, I'll go to layout and I'll put some padding, maybe 20 pixels all the way around. And I might want a little bit of space between the elements here, right? So when you see spacing in a vertical box, it's the space between the vertical elements. So let's put in, I don't know, 30, and it'll space it out a bit. And what's nice about using CSS is you can see that it's automatically updated in our scene builder as well. So your file, save. Then we run it. Hopefully it's going to look a bit better. I get to NetBeans here. There we go. So I run it now. it's better, but it's still not great. And the challenge here is the label at the top is big and nice and easy to read. We see the labels for Bumblebee, count, months, and the legend seem gigantic compared to the graph. So what I really need is I need to be able to handle the labels and this kind of header separately. So the way that I can do that is I can give a special class to this label and then change the sizes of these labels. So I treat them as two separate things. So maybe we'll make regular labels just 20 points. We'll create a special class called header label. What's that? You could in the controller, yeah.
I mean, in CSS, can we refer to the IDs?
I haven't played with that. Have you? No? I haven't personally played with it. The downside of doing something like that, if it's possible, and I haven't tried it, so it may or may not be, but if I want to use this same CSS file for all of my scenes, but I have specific IDs, then it's only going to work with really specific IDs. I'd have to name things exactly the same. So what we're doing here is we're setting up like it's not a class, but we're setting up a special CSS for the header versus regular labels. So by doing this, all labels will automatically be 20-point Arial. And then for that header label, which is special, I'm going to treat it a little bit different. So here, we'll do FX font. And this one, we can make it 40 px Arial. So got a couple different ways of handling labels.
What did you do basically use the FX ID?
Pardon me?
We have an option of using the FX ID.
Okay. Yeah. So if I go back into Scene Builder and I click on my object for the header, and I go to Properties, in here you see how we have like different styles that we can associate with it. It's automatically associated with the style sheet, but here I can choose header label as my style class, and it'll update it. So this way we can handle labels, different labels differently, but perhaps on every scene we have a header label, so we just make that association. So now when I run this, fingers crossed, it's going to look a little bit better. So now my B populations, my labels for the chart and the legend, they look correct, and my header labels a little bit bigger, a little bit fancier. And with these, as with CSS and HTML, you can change the color of the fonts. You can change pretty much everything you want about their style of them. So for example, in my header label, if we want to do something a little crazy, we can say FX text fill. And here we can actually do a linear gradient. I won't claim to have created this. I found this one, but just to give you an idea of some of the different things you can do. So this, let me just, whoops, scroll this in a little. So this basically goes from red to dark orange, right? So it's a gradient transition. So you can do text fills with this. You can add drop shadows to it. You can You can do interior shadows versus exterior shadows. You can do the shadows above. You can put the shadows below. You can do a whole bunch of things with these. Bottom line, you can have some fun with it. And like I said, I'm not so strong with style, but I encourage you to experiment, play around. If there's certain things that you want to do, usually you can look it up. So I was playing around with these bars the other day and wanted them to look a little cleaner than they do. So we could add, I'll show you an example of some of the styles that I found. So what I'll do is I'll just copy it and I'm going to, I'll paste it into here. Oops. You may experience this sometimes with NetBeans. It's actually an open bug where you go to copy something and paste it in, and the clipboard is sort of full because NetBeans uses their own clipboard separate from the Windows one. The solution to get around that problem, you just save your work, close NetBeans, when you go back in, it clears out that clipboard. So you did it with the FX IDs and it worked fine? Yeah. But you can only style that one thing then, right? Yeah. Okay. So if you look here, I'm not sure how well it's going to show up on the screen. There is a very slight gradient, and you can see the 2017 series has got slightly rounded corners at the top. And if you look, there's like a little outline around it as well. It's hard to see on the screen there, but you can experiment with it and play around like this radius. Whenever you see radius, that's usually where it's rounding the corners of your objects for you. And then here you can see they kind of played around with the a gradient there from one color to the next, but they're pretty close to the original color. All right, let me just throw that onto GitHub. It's 9:10. Let's take at most 20 minutes. So we'll try to do this quick. The goal here is to create a line graph. Now, what I'll tell you about line graphs, so this is like I've shown you now how to do bar graphs. Line graphs are basically identical, except instead of the data type being bar graphs, the data type's line graphs. So I want you to recreate the graph we just did, but use a line graph. So you can like copy and paste, you can do whatever you want, but just create a new file and create a line graph of B counts. Give it a try. It's the same type of thing, but it's a line chart instead of a bar graph. And while you're doing that, I will upload this to GitHub.